Time now for Morning Rounds. Joining us are CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Holly Phillips. First up this week, a new report warns of kids being treated with a powerful painkiller. The American Academy of Pediatrics finds emergency room doctors prescribe codeine to children more than 500,000 times a year. That's despite national guidelines that urge against giving the drug to kids. John, tell us about this report and why do you think this is happening in emergency rooms?
Anthony, it's so puzzling. These are clear guidelines, 1997, reiterated in 2006, and potentially fatal outcomes. Doesn't happen all that often, but it can happen. And yet people are still prescribing over a 10-year period the same amount of codeine for kids. These are 3 to 17-year-olds when they come in with cough and for pain control.
So what are some of the alternatives parents should consider here?
Well, first of all, you should know what the side effects are in terms of the symptoms. I think, if your kid is confused, if your child has trouble breathing, change in mental status, that says, hey, maybe there's an overdose. But in addition, there are alternatives. There's a huge pressure of people coming to the emergency room. Your kid's up. I've had this. Your kid's up all night. Sure. Give my kid something. I want some medicine. But sometimes you just have to resist that. For pain, you can use ibuprofen, acetaminophen, even hydrocodone, of course, with the doctor's approval of that. But then for cough, sometimes less is more. And I spoke to the FDA this morning and they said, for kids under the age of 4, over-the-counter medicines are really not recommended. And there is something called just dark honey for kids over the age of 1 that can be effective. It's been shown in studies.
I use Manuka honey on my little girls and it works. It gets them to sleep at night. It calms down their cough just enough.
Also this week, it is finally feeling like spring in much of the country, but that is bringing an extra dose of pollen. If you're among the 50 million Americans with seasonal allergies, the long winter and climate change may be packing a 1-2 punch of misery. Holly, we keep hearing about global warming as it relates to allergies. How does it?
Well, it's actually going to make our allergy seasons worse going forward. Essentially global warming extends allergy season. Spring tends to come earlier and fall tends to come later. And it also creates a longer growing season for plants. So usually we would see tree pollen in the spring, grass pollen in the summer, and then ragweed pollen in the fall. But because the climate is changing, many of those things are kind of overlapping. So in the spring we might have trees, but also grass. And that's giving sort of a 1-2 punch to allergy sufferers.
It seems kind of counterintuitive this year when we've had such a long, hard winter, particularly here in the Northeast. You would think it means a shorter allergy season.
Well, actually it does. Our spring got started late, so our spring allergy season is going to get shorter, but unfortunately more intense. Because what should be blooming, the pollen that should be released over a 1-month period, is now kind of dumping out all at once in just a few days or a week. So it's not going to be an easy allergy season for spring, even though it'll be a little shorter.
Okay, so how do we manage if we have them?
The key is to really try and keep pollen outside of your home, and that's just so that you're not exposed to as much 24 hours a day. So you would want to change your clothes right when you come in, try and shower off pollen if you can, and if you take allergy medicine, take it before your symptoms kick in. Allergy medicine's a little better at preventing bad symptoms than at treating them once you have them.
Good advice. There was good news this week for coffee lovers. A study from the Harvard School of Public Health says people who increase their consumption of coffee might decrease their risk of type 2 diabetes. Researchers looked at data on more than 125,000 people over a 4-year period. Those who increased their coffee drinking by an average of 1.5 cups a day had an 11% lower risk of diabetes compared to people who made no changes in their intake. The findings did not hold true for tea or for decaf.
You have to switch over to coffee like me now. That's what that's saying.
Not good news for me.
Millions of Americans take statins to control their cholesterol, but there was some surprising news this week about the amount of fat and calories statin users consume in the food they eat. That is surprising.
Not surprising to a lot of us. We've been worried about this. The idea of statins giving people a false sense of security. They followed people, statin users, non-statin users, over a 10-year period that ended in 2010. And the people who didn't take statins had about the same caloric intake, the same fat intake. Their weight went up a little bit. But the people who are on statins, their caloric intake went up almost 10%. Their fat intake went up 14%. And their BMI went up over a point. And that is very worrisome for the idea of somebody sitting there with their bag of potato chips, their belly out to here, not exercising, exercising and feeling totally safe because their bad cholesterol is low and really they're an accident waiting to happen.
You would think people taking statins, Holly, would obviously be more aware of the diet issues involved, but yet why are they doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the same things that John pointed out. I kind of understand how that works. And also, as doctors, we do a little bit less diet and exercise counseling, I think, with people who have well-controlled cholesterol. We look at your numbers, you're doing great, so we might not spend as much time reminding everyone to eat well and do what they need for their health. But there's a big difference between having a good cholesterol number and being healthy overall, so we all have to keep that in mind.
All right. Finally this week, a music sensation celebrated a medical milestone. The hip-hop duo Macklemore and Ryan Lewis seemingly came from nowhere, rocketing to #1 without a record label. But Ryan Lewis has a personal story you probably don't know, and he shared it with Ben Tracy.
I'm gonna pop some tags, only got $20 in my pocket.
You may know Ryan Lewis as the fur coat wearing, DeLorean driving half of the rap duo known as Macklemore and Ryan Lewis. Their debut independent album, The Heist, reached #1 and earned them 4 Grammy Awards. But despite being thrown headfirst into fame, there is something Lewis has not talked much about until now.
When you got famous, did you assume at some point you'd have to talk more publicly about this?
I mean, I have an AIDS ribbon tattooed on my arm. Like, if you're gonna do that, you gotta be kind of willing to share.
He's talking about his mother, Julie Lewis. She is HIV positive. She lived with the disease for 30 years.
I had been married a couple years, and we were expecting our first child. She was born. It was a difficult delivery, and I lost a lot of blood, and so I ended up needing a blood transfusion.
It was 1984. Donated blood was not routinely checked for HIV. 6.5 years later, Julie found out her donor was HIV positive. She now had 3 children, including Ryan.
My immediate concern was, is our whole family infected? Because the minute I found out I was HIV positive, the next step was that every single person in our family needed to have an HIV test. And we had to wait 3 or 4 days for those tests to come back, and I will tell you that was the longest 3 or 4 days I will have ever lived.
Despite having a 25% chance of being HIV positive, none of her children were infected. Neither was her husband. But Julie was told she would be dead within 3 to 5 years. She was 32 years old.
But you know what's amazing? My mom never died. She lived.
In an online video launched Tuesday, Ryan Lewis announced his family's way of celebrating his mom's 30-year survival.
We want to build medical centers worldwide that will stand strong for at least 30 years. It's called the 3030 Project.
The first health center will be built in a village in Malawi where more than 1 in 10 adults has HIV or AIDS. They currently have to walk 2 hours down a mountain to the nearest medical care.
If that community stays healthy, that means that the parents stay healthy. And if the parents stay healthy, they can earn a living. And if they're earning a living, then those children can go to school.
Ryan and his music partner, Ben Haggerty, that's Macklemore's real name, are the first donors. They are hoping to inspire others to give and fund 30 health centers worldwide, serving 600,000 people.
We want to see this idea put into action.
It's pretty amazing for me that that my family could have this story, my mom could go through all of this, and it could come to this point, that I could use sort of the platform that's been provided to invest my time and energy into something that that is just really positive.
That is a perfect use of fame.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it really is.
In such a celebrity-obsessed culture, to see how you can translate that into something so meaningful, that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
It's
and
huge.
a great way to respond to something that happened to your family and do something really good as a result.
Dr.
Great.
John LaPook, Dr. Holly Phillips, thank you both.